Yeah, absolutely they could afford to do these things. Jim Farley, CEO of Ford, said this is a golden era. They have never before in the history of these companies made more profits.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Labor creates all wealth. It is Labor Day, folks, and this is the Dale Jackson Show. My name is Jacob Morrison, filling in for Dale Jackson today on Labor Day. You know, you might think, that's strange. Why is a union guy working on Labor Day? What's up with that? And fortunately for Dale Jackson, I don't consider this work, so...
Just, you know, spreading the gospel of solidarity, telling the good news.
No, I'm joshing. There's certainly amount of work that goes into being a radio host, but I do enjoy it, so I'm willing to do this. And like Adam said, I think I really enjoy spreading the good news of solidarity in unions and talking about working people. And there's been a lot of stuff in the news recently about unions and about labor and about working people. Certainly not as much as we deserve, in my opinion. And I actually was speaking to, I've been speaking to this brother who used to be a international representative for the Operating Engineers Union. And he shared on Facebook the other day a photo of a news clipping from 1994 that reported on his appointment to the international staff. Right. As an Alabama union member. And just thinking about that compared to where we are today, I could not imagine being in a world where local press cares enough about what working people are doing instead of bosses, instead of corporations and politicians. I could not imagine living in a world where the local press cares enough to report on an Alabama union member being appointed to the international staff of a union.
Right.
I thought that was incredible. But, you know, and so like I said...
And you know, think about it, Jacob. We used to have labor reporters in city after city. And, you know, even small newspapers had labor reporters, a labor beat.
I was doing some historical research the other day, and... oh, man, I can't remember where it was, but I can't even remember what it was, but it was a small town in East Alabama where there was a labor newspaper. I think it was maybe in Escambia, Alabama. I mean, Escambia is not a big town now, you know, much less. This was in 1902 that I was reading an article from a labor newspaper that was sponsored by the Knights of Labor. Nobody who's listening to me even knows what the hell the Knights of Labor are anymore. But they were big enough that they had a newspaper in Escambia, Alabama. And so, you know, that's how far we've come today. But nevertheless, even we are relatively, and it's important to keep that in mind, that it is a relative increase. But there has been an increase in the media looking at what working people are up to and issues that affect working people. And we talked about earlier the stuff with UPS. That was obviously kind of a big headline. Now, of course, there was a lot of fear-mongering about that, and a lot of attempts, you know, by people like Jim Cramer to pit the UPS drivers and warehouse workers against the rest of us as consumers. They want us to think of ourselves as consumers instead of workers, instead of members of the working class. But it's been in the news, and what's in the news right now is the UAW. The UAW is really, really in the news because of their negotiations with the big three automakers. The United Auto Workers Union has been negotiating with Stellantis, GM, and Ford over the last 6 weeks or so for their new 4-year contract, I think. I think they typically negotiate 4-year contracts. And again, we've been seeing a lot of fear-mongering, especially from types like Jim Cramer, about how this is going to make the auto industry go bankrupt, and how, oh, won't somebody think of the poor CEOs who make 300 times what their median employee makes? Won't somebody think of them? They've got it really hard, don't you know?
What about the shareholders?
What about the shareholders?
What about those dividends?
What about the
Oh,
people?
my.
What about the people who make money not from their labor, not from actually doing something in the world to make it better, to create value? Not what about those people? What about the people who make money because they have money? What about those people? They have it really, really hard. And so what the UAW has been asking for has been really, really inspiring to me. They are, of course, they're asking for things like the end of two-tiered wages,
Right.
which is a horrible situation where people on literally the same assembly line are doing the same work and making half as much as employees who were there before the introduction of the second tier.
Right.
Second-tier employees also don't have pensions. Their health care is worse. And so they're wanting to eliminate the second tier. Everyone, tier one is one of their slogans.
Yeah,
They
equal
also,
pay for equal work.
Equal pay for equal work is very important. They also want to increase wages 46% over 4 years. That's important to keep in mind, that it's over 4 years. It's not initially. And they came to that 46% number because 46% is the raises that the CEOs at all of these companies have seen over the last 4 years.
Right. Fair is fair.
Fair is fair. Over the last 4 years, the CEOs of the big three have seen a 50%, a 46% wage increase, or compensation package increase, because they don't get paid in wages, they get paid in stocks and dividends. Why? So that they have to pay less taxes. That's another thing that is completely perverted about the American tax system, is that not only do we have this entire class of people who just make money because they have money, not because they work, that class of people pay less in taxes than we do, statutorily, where we pay 30% of our taxes in federal income, or in federal income taxes, state income taxes, things like this. Capital gains taxes are something like half of what you would pay if you earned the same amount as a wage. So, there's just another complete, perversion of the American tax system.
That, gambling on the stock market is somehow, I guess more valuable in their eyes than the hard work of your labor.
Exactly. So they're asking for a 46% wage increase, an end of tiers. They're asking for increases to their pension and they're asking for a working families protection program, which would tell the companies that, look, you can move factories to Mexico if you want, but if you do, you have to pay our members the same wage to do community service, to build their communities. You can't just leave our communities in the lurch anymore.
Right. And it's about time we push back on this outsourcing, right? Mm-hmm. We've seen so many towns, so many communities across this country, including right here in Alabama, have been negatively impacted by these plant closures, where in a race to the bottom, the companies go overseas, the companies go wherever they can find less regulations, cheaper wages, hostility to unions.
Yep. It's
a real shame, and I applaud the UAW for fighting back against this trend.
Absolutely. And they're also wanting a 32-hour work week for 40 hours of pay, which is an incredible thing to want. And it's important because in the past, the labor movement fought for a shorter work week.
Right, UAW included.
The UAW included 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what we will. And many members of the UAW don't even get that anymore.
Right.
They don't even have 8-hour days anymore. They don't have 5-day work weeks. And so it is about time that we say, as a working class, we make 50% more every hour. We produce 50% more every hour than people who are working 50 years ago did.
Right. Productivity has increased. We have more technology. We should reclaim our time.
And instead of all those productivity gains going to the people who make money because they have money, they should go to us instead. Because that's who's been seeing it the last 50 years, since 1980. And I'll leave the audience to guess what happened in 1980 that screwed everything in this country up.
Right. Wealth has been concentrated at the top. Income has been concentrated at the top, while the working folks, we have seen our wages stagnate for the last 5 decades, while we've seen the disappearance of job security and retirement pensions and decent health care as an expectation standard for jobs. And we could go on and on.
Exactly. So those are some of the big things that the UAW is asking for at the bargaining table, and the big three automakers, GM and Stellantis, have not even given a counter-proposal. Ford did. It was very insulting. You can take a look at our coverage of that last weekend. But the bottom line is they said, we don't want to do that. And so the UAW is preparing for a strike right now. They are doing practice pickets across the country. They are having demonstrations. They're having rallies, including in the South. In Kentucky, they had a rally last weekend. 500 auto workers were at a big rally in Louisville. And so, you know, that's kind of the state of where we are with those negotiations. And before we get somebody that tweets us at Labor Reporters on Twitter, before we get somebody that tweets us and says, you're going to bankrupt these companies, they don't have the money to pay for this. Never in the history of these companies have they made more profit. They made $250 billion in profit in the last 10 years.
You said with a T?
With a T. Do you know how much $1 trillion is? That is 1,000 billion.
Right.
Do you know how much a billion is? That is 1,000 million. These companies made $250 billion, not in revenue, in profits. In profits. And so, yeah, absolutely they could afford to do these things. Jim Farley, CEO of Ford, said this is a golden era for Ford. They have never before in the history of these companies made more profits. GM, Ford, and Stellantis. And so, and Ford actually increased from 2022 to 2023. They are on track to increase their dividend payouts by 150%. Last year, it was $2 billion with a B in dividends. What is that? Dividends are just payments to people who own. That is just payments to people, money going to people who have money because they have money. Last year, dividend payouts were $2 billion. This year, they are on track to reach $5 billion. Okay? So if you've got enough money to pay 150% more than just the last year to people who have money because they have money, then look, you can do the same for your workers. And so that's our position, and that's UAW's position. We're going to be supporting them absolutely, uncritically, in whatever decision the membership tries to make. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.